Hey everyone, welcome to Wildlife Inspired. I'm your host, Scott Keys. And in today's video, one of the final videos in my light sequence. And in this video, we're going to talk about the right light for the right bird. And we'll get to it right after this. Now in today's video, we're going to talk about the right light for the right bird subject, or maybe the right bird for the right light. Now, this video, like a lot of videos, is going to be very subjective. So a lot of this is just my personal opinion or my personal preference, but I'm going to explain why, and I'm going to go through each of the types of light with each of the types of birds that I photograph. In the other videos, I did cover some of the different types of light. So in this video, we're going to cover diffused light, direct light, golden hour, and blue hour. And for subjects, I like to break these into categories just to make it real simple. So we're going to choose birds in flight, shorebirds, songbirds, and ducks or waterfowl. And I'm going to try to show you a lot of examples over on the side. I hope you appreciate these examples. These are all photos taken by myself over the years. And I'm just going to dive right in with the beginning of the day, and that's blue hour. Now, one of the advantages of blue hour is the color. And I've talked about this in other videos, but there are some challenges, and that is the very low light. And because of that, because of the very low light, my least favorite subject to shoot at blue hour are birds in flight. Now, when we think about birds in flight, you think about motion, and motion requires a little bit higher shutter speed. When you don't have that available light, your shutter speeds tend to go very low, and your noise can also get very high. Let me show you some examples. I've got a northern harrier here, and while the settings on this don't look far off, you'll notice the noise isn't extremely high. One of the reasons is because I'm shooting this a little back into the sun, into this open sky. Now, the camera is metering plenty of available light with that sky. The problem is the subject is very dark. In fact, if I showed you the raw image, you would see this subject almost looks like a silhouette. Now, this also emphasizes the need for post-processing. And if you keep some of your settings in the right area and you've got the right ability, maybe you can make something out of this image. But it could be very, very difficult, especially when you're just looking at the raw file. An example of that noise, I'm going to show you a short-eared owl. The noise in this image is all the way at 8,000. That's very, very tough on cameras. And the shutter speed is down at 1/320th of a second. Those are not ideal settings for birds in flight. So this blue hour can be very, very difficult. It can also be very difficult to find birds moving at that time. An interesting note, short-eared owls are actually one of the subjects that prefer to hunt in this light right after dusk or right at dawn, kind of before the sun comes up or when it goes down. You can certainly catch them during the daylight, but they really prefer this crepuscular feeding habit. So they like to hunt right as the sun is going down or coming up. But again, while they may be available, if you're lucky enough to find them, the settings can be very, very tough. I do want to make a note. There's noise reduction software available out there. You guys probably know if you follow my channel, I'm an ambassador of Topaz, so I highly endorse their noise reduction, but you can use other noise reduction software as well, or you can use Photoshop and Lightroom because they also have noise reduction capabilities. So my least favorite type of bird to shoot in blue hour is probably just birds in flight. Now, that's not to say there aren't some ways that you can take advantage of this with birds in flight. I want to show you two images real quick. This is a favorite image of mine, snow geese. You can see it's atypical of bird in flight images, small in frame. It's got motion blur, intentional wing blur. And I just wanted to take advantage of the sky. Really great example of those blue hour colors, by the way. And then here's another one, just a gull flying along the horizon. Again, just trying to take advantage of the colors in the sky. Now, another subject that I'm not crazy about shooting in blue hour are songbirds. And the reason, again, is because of available light. And with songbirds, they tend to be quicker moving. So you've got that problem with very low light and the ability to capture birds that might be moving. Another thing about songbirds is they often don't show themselves until the sun comes up. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule. You'll notice before the sunrise, you'll hear the birds in the trees all over, but how many times you actually get a good look during that time frame? So because they're not easy to find, and because of that need to freeze the motion if they're moving, they are not one of my favorite subjects to shoot during blue hour. In fact, I went through a catalog of songbirds and I shoot hundreds a year. I post hundreds a year. I probably shoot thousands. The following images were the only ones I could really find that fit this category. And these aren't really blue hour images. I did a video on magic light. I want you to consider the light you're seeing now on this bay-breasted warbler magic light, meaning that the sun is literally on the horizon. There are hints of gold in here, but notice the very tough settings to shoot this at. So on this particular bird, we're shooting at 1/160th of a second. That is not ideal for songbird photography, but again, it can be done. I've got another example here. Again, this is that magic light, not true blue hour, so I cheated a little on these two. This is a nuthatch, and again, with some tougher settings here, the ISO is at 5600. Now, I did look through my catalog, and I managed to find one songbird during this blue hour time that I thought exemplified what I was talking about, meaning I captured the blues and the pinks in the background, and this is a horned lark. Now, if you're looking at the settings, they look a little bit different than the others. They're not quite as difficult, 1/800th of a second with ISO 400. And you may say, well, those don't sound like blue hour settings. You said there's not a lot of available light. Those settings don't indicate that that was tough light. Here's the other thing just kind of that's interesting about snow is it will reflect the ambient light. It's like using a giant reflector. So I get the ability to pick up some extra light because that snow is reflecting it all off the ground. I thought that was interesting. When I looked at the settings, I was a little surprised by how much of a bonus I got out of that snow reflecting the ambient light. But this is a horned lark truly taken during blue hour. And because I had so few of these, I didn't have much to show you, but I hope you enjoyed this one. Let's get on to two subjects that I actually really do enjoy. Actually, three subjects that I enjoy shooting during blue hour. Shorebirds are pretty readily available if you know where to find them. They tend to be very quiet during blue hour. They're not very active yet. And so if you can find one that's willing to just cooperate and pose for you, you can frame it up in the blue hour light. You can see a couple examples here. This is a little piping plover that I caught just as the sun went down. I used a silhouette on this heron. I found the skies very, very interesting. You could see those blue hour tones in the background. And then kind of transitioning to one of my favorite subjects and getting out of shorebirds, this avocet. I use this as a transition because in this image, it really is acting like waterfowl or a duck. Very quiet in the water. It was feeding, but not feeding very rapidly. So I was able to shoot it. And again, just notice the tougher settings, 1/60th of a second. Shooting a bird at 1/60th of a second is certainly not an easy task, but there's very, very little light to work with. You can also take advantage of some of these backgrounds. So in this case, city lights in the background, I thought were really, really appealing. And it leads you into my favorite subject, or one of my favorite subjects for blue hour, and that's waterfowl. I think waterfowl is a little easier to work with. They're not often fast moving at this time of day. So if you just kind of get them out there floating in the water and you take advantage of the pretty colors, if you've got the colors, you can really, really maximize it. And then this red-breasted merganser is a good example of that. Kind of highlights everything. You get some of those background lights and the blue hour tones, and it really, really worked well. There's one other subject that I don't shoot very often. I want to put it in here because during blue hour, it's probably maybe the most ideal subject to shoot, and that's stationary owls. The reason it's so appealing to shoot these owls in blue hour is because often they're completely still. And in the absence of a lot of light, you can move your shutter speeds down. Couple things, you'll probably want a tripod. You may even want something called a remote trigger or a trigger release so that you're not shaking the lens at all with your hand movement. But you can shoot at very, very low shutter speeds, and sometimes you can get some moody effects. I remember this short-eared owl perched up on a tree at blue hour, and it was so still. I was just able to play around with the shutter speeds and get the exposure right. And I really, really like this final image. It's probably tough to see on the YouTube channel, but trust me, there's a little tiny short-eared owl sitting on the end of that branch. And as we move out of blue hour, we get into really the prime light of the day, and that's golden hour. Now, I want to make a caveat for this one. Golden hour works for everything. Now, there's a reason that golden hour isn't my favorite for birds in flight. And it really has nothing to do with the result of the image. So here's a sharp-shinned hawk that really looks great at golden hour. But in that very short 30-minute time window where golden hour exists, it's very tough to find subjects to cooperate. So it's not that the birds in flight look bad. It's simply because they're very, very hard to find. This sharp-shinned hawk is an example of one. But as I go through my catalog, again, I just don't find tons of these raptors taken at that perfect golden light. Now, my next least favorite, and again, I'm talking about golden hour, so they all look good, but my next least favorite is going to be songbirds. I'll show you a couple examples. Here's a common yellowthroat. You'll notice the settings become a little bit more favorable, so I get a little bit more available light. But often with golden hour, if it's not diffused, what you're going to get are shadows. Now that will appear in the images in various places. And so it's not always ideal to shoot unless you've got open backgrounds and you're not in a real sticky environment. This is a yellow-throated vireo, pretty good example of kind of being out in the open, not a lot of sticks to contend with, not a lot of shadows. And then there's ducks. And boy, do ducks look good. I would say of my two favorite subjects in golden hour, it's waterfowl or ducks and shorebirds. I'll just show you some images because it's so easy to see why you love them. You can do some creative things like with this wood duck. You get a lot of vibrant colors often, in this case happening in the background, so that vibrancy carries forward to the whole image. And then just look at the way it lights up this eared grebe. It just makes it look beautiful, especially around the eyes and kind of that signature ear plumage. And while waterfowl looks amazing, my favorite subject to shoot during this golden hour is shorebirds. There's a couple reasons for this. Shorebirds are typically a little bit easier to find. If you're in a good area and they're around and you simply lay still, if you're there before the sun comes up, you can often get very, very close looks. This is a sanderling that I've shown in some other videos. This is the same sanderling, again, in that really golden light starting to come up. And then this is a black-necked stilt. I'm able to work with all of these birds at very close distance and really maximize this beautiful golden color. So while all birds look good at golden hour, I will tell you, I think shorebirds are my absolute favorite, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in part 2.